So this is going to be a video to explain the rhetorical evaluation of a math-based text assignment. So this is the next in a series of assignments. It is for this semester and for the math and writing learning community, the last major assignment. So we are getting close to the end. So hooray, yay, and awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, and then there will also be a lesson here on how to engage with different types of logic and statistics and that kind of thing, and how to kind of do this, not just this assignment well, but also consider different types of sources and argument. So as a starting place, the rhetorical evaluation of a math-based text is choosing any sort of cultural text that it could be a news article, a magazine article, a YouTube video, it could be a song, it could be some news broadcast, it could be a sports commentator clip, it could be based on your favorite game, it could be a research article, any sort of text broadly defined, anything with a message that is not just simply reporting facts. And we'll talk, it has to be using math, using statistics, using some sort of data to frame, to support some sort of argument. That's an important consideration. And so as you're thinking about choosing a math-based text, that's an important thing. It can't just be raw data, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute, and show you some different examples so you can compare and contrast. The other side of this is it is a rhetorical evaluation. So it's not just saying here's what this text says, or why this text matters to me, or what this text means for sports, or for video gaming, or for my career, or for buying a house, or whatever it is. It has, what the coolest TikTok video is. It's not about the content, it's about how the content is framed and presented. So that's the difference between a general evaluation and using rhetoric, or using the lenses of writing and the aspects of writing as a lens for that evaluation, right? So we want to think about how is the creator of the text crafting that text and the argument itself to make their point. So it's not about the content, it's about how the content is shaped. That's key. It's not just what is happening or what is being said, it's how it's being said, why it's being done in this way, possibly why they used the medium that they did. But most importantly with this one, how are they using the data? How are they using math to make the argument they're making? Cool, awesome. So something to consider. So as you're thinking about that, keep that in mind. All right, over dramatic, I know. All right, so you continue applying what you've learned from what we have in class. You might examine how the math was catered to a particular audience or a demographic of readers. You may highlight how the genre of the text played a role in the form the math information took. You could evaluate the effectiveness of it, the scientific accuracy of it, and how it was presented to accomplish the writer's purpose. So first you have to find a text, then you have to analyze the text, then you have to evaluate how effectively that text or that creator of the text used the data, whether it was accurate, whether it should have been translated into an alternate form or could have been to maximize an effect with a different audience. And as you analyze and evaluate the writer's effectiveness, you should also be incorporating your own translation or transformation of data. So if the text uses data, but it's using a chart or a table, well, then you want to transform that data into alphabetic text, writing it out in sentences. If that text used alphabetic sentences and embedded a statistic inside a sentence, well, maybe you can give us the data or the table. If they listed out a series of things and items, and you wanted to make that feel more number-based and put it into a chart, those are all ways to transform how information is being presented, how that math-based information is being presented, kind of bouncing across our different visual math-based genres, tables, equations, graphs, alphabetic text, formulas, that kind of thing. And then here are the basic requirements. You can see them there. Hooray. As an example, we can pull this excerpt from the book Pandemic by Sonia Shaw, and I realize pandemic should be italicized if we're using MLA or APA format. Anyway, but in this quote, this book is all about health, and this was published in 2016, but it's all about how we approach pandemics, which is interesting because we had one a few years later. Interesting, quote unquote. But in this case, they were talking about different medical approaches in the 1800s. And so sadly, they're talking about childhood mortality, but the framing of the math here is really important. Again, it's not so much the content, though it's sad and interesting, more childhood mortality rates as they are. But they described the graph. If you plotted the population density, how many people are in an area, and early childhood mortality on a graph for the years between 1851 and 1860 in England and Wales, you'd see a straight line heading upward. And we want to think, what does that language make us picture? That as population density increases, early childhood mortality also increases, right? Is it, to use language from the math class, is it as a constant rate? Is it at a constantly increasing rate? What is it? But also a straight line heading upward, right? Doesn't it matter how you set the graph and practical domains and ranges and visuals and things? So we want to think about whether that's an accurate statement as well. Does the language depict what's actually happening? By straight line heading upward, do they mean at more of a 45-degree angle, at a 90-degree angle, at a 75-degree angle? Because we know based on our slope and what we're learning in the math class, those things change the accuracy of that statement. Here, the language is being used for dramatic effect instead of scientific accuracy. So it's being used more for an emotional response or an aesthetic approach rather than a scientific or logical approach. So we want to think about those things. So that's just to get us started. So as you think about the way different texts might use data, it could be something like this, where it's in more of an academic text and that sort of thing. It could also be something, let's go through some things it could be and things it couldn't be. Now we could say that, well, here, I went and I looked up statistics on my favorite sports ball guy or players. And in this case, I think I Googled best all-time players based on the stats. And in this case, they give me just statistics, right? They give me these players' averages, the kind of and how they compare to, I think, others, but there's no actual argument aside from the fact that they have the best stats, right? That's an important thing. That is not a math-based text. That is raw data. So those are not, you wouldn't want to choose that sort of text. So even though this is a web page, which counts as a quote-unquote text, it is not making an argument with the data. It is simply informing you of the data. So that's not going to be, that type of text is not going to be what you want to select. Beyond that, we also have, we could look at something like video games, and we could say, okay, well, what are some things people say about video games, and based on the stats, is there something? So this article, again, the report, they're sharing a summary of a report. Summaries, even though there's data here, there's not an actual argument. It's just, here's what the report said in a simplified way, or let's give you the highlights. And if you look, like, honestly, this is something that could have very well been generated by a ChatGPT situation. It could have been where it's just like, here's a report, write me a summary of it, or highlight key quotes and all that fun stuff and everything. And as we're looking at it, we can go, oh, look, the report reveals the number of Americans playing video games remains strong and encompasses players across all demographics. Now, that technically is a claim, actually. We could do that, but most of the rest of this article, beyond that one claim, is kind of the essential facts. It's reporting basic facts of, here's how many people play video games, here's where they're from, here's how they identify, and there's some interesting stuff here. We might have to dig a little bit to see how they're actually using that beyond just straight reporting. If all they're doing is reporting facts, that's not going to be easy to analyze, even if it gives us good data to transform into our own mathematical structures. So I wouldn't necessarily lean hard into this as a first choice for this assignment. That being said, you could find ways to use it, but let's see if we can find something even better. When we look at, go all the way to the top, gaming in 23 will be remembered as an under 98 or 2007. That's a stronger claim. So gaming is an incredible hot streak, they're saying. But in this case, the data is not the same. Oh, so many ads on some of these sites. Make it stop. close. So in this case, they're making claims like it's been the most consistent of years for the gaming industry. There are certain, it gives us, when it comes to best years in gaming history, there are 2 years that tend to stand out. They give us 2 years and they give us games connected to those 2 years. Now that data is not, that's just saying, remember all these cool games. And for those who know about gaming, they may know that The Legend of Zelda or Tekken 3 or Gran Turismo were big games, or Baldur's Gate or StarCraft, that these were games that did very well. And so but without that context, maybe they're not presenting this data effectively. Maybe there's another way to present it. So this might be an opportunity to transform. They're saying that these were powerful years because, and think of these list of games, right? And then they're saying 2023 is going to be like that. They go into a little more argument. Now, one interesting thing I thought that worked well was, they say, here are all the biggest and best new video game releases of 23, and they give us a list, I think, with some sort of,
This is a reminder. Lunchtime.
in case you didn't know it was lunchtime, depending on when you're eating. They give the rankings, I believe, over here of each of these games. And so that actually is a data point, but I bet you can figure out a better way to present that information numerically and still give us a sense of how these plot out. Scatter plot might work, table might work. Maybe you lump them into categories of how many games landed in this percent and then compare it. But maybe but how is this person, how is this text presenting the information? Because they are making an argument that 2023 has some good games, that those good games compare well, and that this year as a whole compares well with other major well-known games in gaming industry. So this would be a great text because they're making a claim and they're using data. How well they're presenting that data could be questioned, right? They're using visuals, but they're not using visuals. They're using visuals to like enhance aesthetically. They're not using visuals to make this data easier to take in from a technological or scientific perspective. And that means that we're not getting as deep, that it's possible it could also be affecting our ability to analyze and understand the text. So there's a couple things going on there. That might be a better example. So let's jump to another article, a different topic, just to make sure you see the variety. So maybe it's not video games, maybe it's not sports. Maybe you're trying to think about your career. You could go look if you're going into the medical field or becoming an engineer or going into nursing specifically, or becoming an anesthesiologist, or whether you're wanting to know what the best makeup for a different situation is. You can look at all these different topics. So let's just pick one. So in this case, 65. So here's an article from, let's see, what's the source here? CNBC. So this is supposed to be a news article, and it's reporting that 65% of women would buy a home without being married first. What to know if you're one of them. So so the rest of this, so we've got key points talking about why it might be good to do that, why it might not. And there are, so it presents a little bit of context, and it also does this thing where a lot of news stories will do, it picks a single person to focus on, but then goes and gives a larger picture. So they'll choose an individual to personalize a story, like starting out here, anecdotally, and then they'll jump down to some of the more broad statistics. Nearly 2/3 of single female prospective homeowners said they'd rather not wait until marriage to buy a home. What's more, 30% of current female homeowners purchased their home while they were single. So we start getting some of this data, and then we see a kind of a back and forth. A purchase like this increasingly proving to be a source of pride, so there's some claim there. But most of the data, as you can see, is embedded alphabetical text where they're inserting the statistic into the sentence itself. So we could go through this. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of the article, which I think is right here. So while they say the journey from deciding to buy a home to actually closing varies from person to person, it could take a while. They also say, they kind of end with this culminating thing of educate yourself, decide whether this is what's best for you, learn what's possible, and don't make assumptions because of your demographic that this would be something that's off limits, or something that you should lean into. Like, check your financial situation and think carefully. So while the argument takes the very middle of the road, it's doing more than reporting. It's presenting multiple sides. So whether you see that as a compare contrast, this might be a good article to say, how well do they stay balanced? Do they present statistics in a way that keeps them balanced and that gets people thinking about this, which is a meaningful rhetorical purpose, or not? And so that's another option you might be able to lean into. But again, we're looking for math-based texts, and the research we're going to be doing as we use these 4 to 9 reliable sources, some of them from class and 3 of them should be academic and scholarly. When we're choosing these texts, we need them to be doing something with the math, not just give us raw data and not just reporting raw data, but helping us consider a perspective, whether that's to open up possibilities, even if they're doing it in a very gentle way, or whether they're throwing out a strong argument and it's a conspiracy theory video and they're saying, here are the stats that make me believe this, or why you should believe this. We can say how we can do fact checking as part of this project, and that could be some of these reliable sources. But keep in mind, we're not really focusing as much on the content as much as how they present it. Presenting facts inaccurately is meaningful. That's one thing. Presenting facts in a table for aesthetic purpose or technological purpose to help the cognitive uptake, like, that's meaningful. And those are the kinds of things we want to focus more on, we don't want to focus on just restating whatever claim or argument they've given us. So keep these things in mind as you dig into this last project of the semester, if you're doing it as a project 3. If I use this video in another class in the future, keep in mind I may move it around in a semester from time to time, depending on how creative I'm getting with assignments or timing on other things. So, but if it is your project 3, hooray, you're almost done. Feel free, as always, to text me with questions and reach out for help if you need it. Cool. Have fun. Enjoy. Happy writing.